Frederisha is one of those Baltic cruise ports that can really surprise you, because it's not a big city stop like Copenhagen or Stockholm, and it's not the kind of place most people would probably plan a whole trip around. But that's actually part of why it works so well on a cruise itinerary. So in this video, I'll go through 10 things you need to know about Frederisha Cruise Port, from where the ship docks to what you can do independently and when a shore excursion makes sense. One of the best things about Frederisha Cruise Port is how easy it is when you arrive. Frederisha is located on the eastern side of the Jutland Peninsula in Denmark. So if you're on a Baltic or Northern Europe cruise, it often gives you a different kind of Danish port day from Copenhagen. This isn't one of those ports where you step off the ship and then have to work out shuttle buses, taxis, trains, metro lines, or a complicated route into the center. The cruise pier is close to the town, and when I visited on Arcadia, the ship docked right by the waterfront, just a short walk from the promenade and the main part of Frederisha. There isn't a large cruise terminal in the way you might expect at some of the bigger cruise ports. It's more of a small port area, and that actually gives it a very different feel. You step off the ship, and almost straight away, you feel like you're somewhere local. From the cruise berth, it's only a few minutes into the town center. Depending on exactly where your ship is docked and how quickly you walk, you're looking at roughly 5 to 7 minutes to reach the main town area. That makes Frederisha a very simple port if you want an easy day ashore. And on a Baltic itinerary, that can actually be quite welcome, because if you've got big ports like Copenhagen or Stockholm on your cruise, Frederisha gives you a bit of breathing space. When you arrive in Frederisha, don't expect a huge cruise terminal or a big commercial setup. However, there are volunteers handing out town maps and a very friendly local welcome. It didn't feel polished in a big city cruise terminal way, but it felt charming, warm, and very genuine. And that's really what stood out about Frederisha. The town seems to make an effort when cruise ships arrive. You feel like they're pleased to see the ship, rather than just processing thousands of passengers through a terminal. It's the sort of welcome that makes the port memorable, even though the place itself is small. The next thing to know is that Frederisha is not a big city sightseeing port. It has a waterfront, a town center, shops, restaurants, green spaces, ramparts, and local history. And actually, that can be one of the nicest things about it. It's also one of those places you probably wouldn't visit otherwise. Most people planning a holiday to Denmark will think of Copenhagen first. Frederisha probably isn't at the top of the list, but that's one of the lovely things about cruising. Sometimes it takes you to places that you wouldn't necessarily choose as a main destination, but you're glad you experienced them once you're there. If you're staying in Frederisha itself, this is absolutely a port you can explore independently. You don't need a shore excursion just to see the town. Because the ship docks so close, you can walk into the center very easily. You can also get off early and explore Frederisha first, before going on an excursion later in the day. That works really well, because the town is close enough that you can have a proper look around without using up loads of time. The town center itself is pleasant for a gentle wander. You'll find shops, places to stop for a drink, restaurants, and a much quieter feel than the bigger ports. There are also good places to eat if you want a relaxed lunch ashore. If you're exploring Frederisha itself, one of the main things to see is the ramparts. Frederisha is known for having some of the best preserved ramparts in Northern Europe, and they're a big part of the town's identity. The town has a strong military history, and the ramparts are a reminder of Frederisha's past as a fortified town. They form a green defensive ring around part of the town, with paths and grassy areas, and views of the town. They give the town its character, and they make Frederisha feel more interesting than just a small town with shops and cafes. Another landmark you're likely to come across in Frederisha when visiting the ramparts is the White Water Tower. It's one of the most recognizable sights in the town, and it's close to the ramparts, so it fits naturally into a local walking route. The tower has that almost small castle-like look to it, and depending on opening times, you may be able to go up for views across Frederisha. Even if you don't climb it, it's still worth seeing from the outside as part of your walk. You may also come across churches, quiet streets, small squares, and historic corners as you walk around. If you want to go further afield from Frederisha, one of the best options is Odense. Odense is the hometown of Hans Christian Andersen, and if you grew up with stories like The Little Mermaid, The Ugly Duckling, The Emperor's New Clothes, Thumbelina, or The Princess and the Pea, then Odense gives the day a completely different feel. Odense is around 45 minutes away by coach, depending on traffic and timings, so this is where I do think an organized shore excursion makes sense. Odense itself is a lovely contrast to Frederisha. It feels more like a proper Danish city break destination, with cobbled streets, colorful houses, museums, cafes, and that Hans Christian Andersen connection running through it. The main attraction is the Hans Christian Andersen Museum, and it's really well done. It's modern, interactive, and much more atmospheric than you might expect if you're thinking of a traditional museum with a few displays behind glass. It's designed in a way that brings the stories and the imagination of Hans Christian Andersen to life, so it works whether you already know his stories well or you're just interested in seeing something different while you're in Denmark. Near the museum, you can also see Hans Christian Andersen's childhood home, which gives another layer to the visit. It's also worth exploring the streets of Odense as well, because Odense itself is really pretty in places. You've got cobbled streets, colourful houses, little historic lanes, and that classic Scandinavian town feel. If you're interested in the Hans Christian Andersen connection, Copenhagen also has the Little Mermaid, which is one of the easiest sites to add into a cruise day there. I've got a full Copenhagen cruise port guide as well, covering the docking areas, transport, Nyhav, Tivoli, and the Little Mermaid, and I'll put a link to that in the description. Another popular shore excursion option from Fredericia is LEGOLAND Billund. This is one that will appeal much more depending on who you're traveling with, because it's a very different kind of cruise day. It's the original Legoland, and for families, it can be a much more exciting option than spending the whole day walking around a small town. Legoland is further inland, and once you factor in travel time, entry, the size of the park, and getting back to the ship, it's much easier to have the timings organized for you. So this is one where a shore excursion is probably the best option. For families though, it could be the best choice. Odense and Legoland are probably the most popular excursion from Frederisha. You may also see excursions to Christiansfeld and Jelling. Christiansfeld is a UNESCO World Heritage Town and is known as a Moravian church settlement. Jelling is another important historic option, especially if you're interested in Viking history. The Jelling monuments are connected to Denmark's Viking past, with runic stones, burial mounds, and the church. The final thing to know about Frederisha is not to miss the Sailaway, and not because it's the most dramatic scenic sail-out in the Baltic. It's not like sailing through the Stockholm archipelago, and it's not one of those huge landscape moments where everyone is out on deck for the scenery. Frederisha is different. What made the Sailaway special is the local send-off. People came down to the waterfront with Danish flags to wave the ship away, and it was genuinely lovely. It's such a simple thing, but it makes a big difference, because after a day in a small, relaxed town, where the welcome already feels quite personal, seeing locals come out again at the end makes the whole port feel very warm. It's one of the things I remember most about Frederisia. Frederisha gives you one of the easier and more relaxed port days in the Baltic. But not every port on this kind of itinerary works like that. Some need shuttles, some need more planning, and some are much easier if you know what to expect before you step off the ship. So next, watch my Baltic cruise port playlist, where I'll take you through the ports that are easy, the ones where transport matters, and the places where a bit of planning can make a big difference to your day ashore.